Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns, the 2020 Mastery Mission. 20 topics, 20 guests for 20 minutes. We're here to unlock the tribal wisdom from the legends of tech sales to help you get one step closer to mastery. I'm Simon Koutis and I'm joined by my co-host Ollie Kune.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone. Wherever you may be in the world.
And we're absolutely delighted to welcome Kyle Kearns. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Ollie. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, Kyle.
Thanks very much.
Indeed. In the way of an introduction, Kyle, you're currently Regional Sales Director at Starburst, but you came from a very humble beginning, shall we say, starting in recruitment and then transition into SDR. And within a period of 8 years, you found yourself from recruitment SDR into becoming a regional director. And you've really developed a reputation as, you know, being that first man on the ground IC hunter. You've had success at Databricks and now Starburst, kind of repeating the trick. 20 minutes, could you please introduce your topic?
Okay, the topic I'm going to speak to today is all around accountability and the importance of accountability, particularly in pre-IPO, early stage, sort of Series A through to D stage organizations and tech companies. The reason I'm passionate about this, and I believe that it's really important, is that, you know, people join pre-IPO companies and there's a big craze to do so. But the reality is, particularly in the early days, it is really hard. It's a proper hustle. It's, you know, you lack data points. There's not necessarily a clear-cut sales process. You're trying to find repeatability, but it's hard. So as a topic, that's something that, again, that, you know, I'm passionate about, and we're going to talk to in more detail today.
Yeah, as a subject, you know, especially for us, you know, being in the recruitment game, you know, every salesperson, everybody we speak to wants to be part of the next big or next exciting pre-IPO company. But why is it so important to really think about these considerations and to understand whether a pre-IPO company is right for you?
It's a great question, and you're absolutely right and spot on that, you know, people are going after those pre-IPO companies, and I think the reality soon kicks in. It particularly did at me in the last two companies I've been in, where, you know, there's no brand awareness. People don't know who you are. You're trying to crack into large enterprise accounts, you know, particularly for my team right now, and in the enterprise roles, you're trying to break into banks and large CPG manufacturers. It's really hard without having that brand awareness. So, you know, people are chasing, you know, the dream to get into a pre-IPO company because, of course, you know, there is the potential that company could get multiple rounds of funding, high valuation, and, you know, make significant money as an IC along the way. But yeah, the reality is that in the early days, without that sales process, without that repeatability being clear cut, it is really, really hard.
And what happens if you get this wrong? What sort of impact can that have on somebody?
Yeah, it's, you know, so, I mean, one of the big things, and, you know, the things that I look to with my team and like as an IC that I was always really like looking at was focus, and like focusing in like a set number of accounts, because the reality is if you've got, you know, 50 to 100 accounts that are large sort of global accounts, right, that are very complicated, they've got multiple different BUs and different stakeholders. You know, I'm selling, and my team are selling like a technical product, right? So obviously we deal with the IT, we deal with the business. You know, that complexity is very challenging, and it can take a long time to land deals, and then even, you know, even longer just to like figure out a way to get into the account. So prospecting and PGing into the right accounts and having that focus early on is really, really important.
So what are the first steps? But what does it take to thrive, you know, in this type of environment as an IC? And I suppose, what are your first priorities when you first land into a new kind of pre-IPO first man on the ground?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, look, again, right, on the topic of accountability, you don't typically have data points there. So you don't know, for example, how many new business meetings do you need to do in order to progress an opportunity? How many meetings in an account do you need to do to actually progress into a proof of concept? How many proof of concepts do you need to do to land an initial deal? So for me, around the topic of accountability, like the first thing I've done in the last two organizations I've been in, I've started to collect data points about the business which I'm running, right? So that's weekly data points to understand, how many meetings am I doing in a week? How many of them are NBMs, new business meetings? How many of them are impact meetings? How many of them are partner meetings as well? So for me, one of the first things I do is it is a manual process, and there are tools that you can, there's some automation that can support you with this, but personally for me, I love doing it personally the manual way. So, every Sunday I would review my business, right? The previous week and the week ahead. How many new business meetings have I got set up for that week? What are the key impact meetings that I've got set up for that week? And collecting that data becomes really, really important, particularly when, you start to land deals sort of 6-9 months in, when you start to land these enterprise accounts. You can reflect back on that data, and then you can understand, how many meetings did it take to land that organization? How many partners were involved as a result of this, et cetera, et cetera. So that collecting that data and sort of, being accountable to do that is really important. And it's always one of the first things that I do when I join an early stage company.
So, Carl, in our discovery call, you spoke about impact meetings. Can you define your definition of an impact meeting and why it's beneficial?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, the definition of an impact meeting is a deal progression meeting. Okay, so it's a meeting in a given week or a meeting that's due to be set up that is going to progress your deal. So that could be, for example, a legal conversation. It could be a procurement conversation. It could be a champion meeting. It could be an economic buyer meeting that's going to progress your deal forward. And those meetings and new business meetings are the most important ones to track. And for me, if you've got a deal and commit or upside best case, however you define it in your organization, you should be having impact meetings, at least one every single week in the accounts. And arguably, this is what I say to my team: if you don't have impact meeting in, an upside or a commit deal that you're forecasting for that quarter, is it really an upside or a commit deal? Like, there should be champion meetings in there weekly, sometimes twice a week, right? If that's an in-quarter deal, the deal's 3 months, maybe weeks away from closing. You're speaking to your champion on a weekly basis. So that's what an impact meeting is to me. It's really deal progression and sort of just deal stability as well, which is going to help you, help you with your forecast. And the impact meetings and tracking that is important, particularly for the upside and the commit deals, because if you're not having the impact meetings, they're spending it most likely with someone else, right? And that someone else might not be their internal meetings. That could be with another vendor or one of your competitors. So being all over your impact meetings, sort of tracking them and making sure that you're scheduling them on a weekly basis, whether it be just general cadence you've got with with your champion or with an EB, for example, is really critical, particularly in the early days, right? When you're starting to really kind of figure things out, that's when it's really important.
How does this context then help with the quality control, Kyle?
The impact meetings, the deal progression meetings, the quality of them is really, really important, and it's critical for repeatability. So definitely they're the ones which, you need to be really strict on your time with and tracking them, because you land the deal, you'll understand a bit more around their buying process. Looking at the impact meetings that had to happen to land that deal, there could be some key people that get involved that you've never heard of, and all of a sudden they come in at the final stage and they want to negotiate. So tracking that and being aware of the various different impact meetings that have to happen to land the deal will be extremely valuable to you as you're looking at an expansion, because their decision process, who key stakeholders are, and that sometimes there are other people that need to be convinced. And for an expansion deal, it's definitely the case that there's going to be even more people involved in that decision process, because your deal is going to be bigger.
So what are some of the mistakes that people make when it comes to creating personal accountability?
Rushing to get to those impact meetings, rushing to get in deals, rushing to run their first technical validation, proof of concept, proof of value, whatever it might be. So tracking the PG activity the number of new business meetings that you're truly having. Like, so by new business meetings, right, like, there's lots of definitions that are thrown around, but really it's, getting into a new business unit, speaking to someone of influence that, can ultimately sort of drive momentum and, get you to an impact meeting at some stage in some form of deal progression and get you in the door. So, tracking BMs and tracking pipeline added on a weekly basis, and not just at the early stage pipeline, but then tracking the pipeline that progresses from, you get the different Salesforce stages from like a stage 1 through to a stage 2 and beyond, is the most important thing you can really do as a new rep, as a new AE when you're starting in any company, really, right? That's not just an early stage company, because the expectation is that, you're there to add pipeline. So you're basically an SDR again, and that should be your mindset. You should literally just be day in, day out prospecting, but not like, just again, like, another topic around that, and it's related to the question around the mistake. Don't just go in there prospecting without doing research. You've got your account list, 15 to 25 accounts, research them, right? Spend time researching them. Honestly, like, if you want to make your career out of, let's say, 3 to 5 accounts in the company which you're in, right? Research that account. Spend a day. Honestly, spend a day. Okay, to this account, if you truly believe it fits in with the ICP and it fits in with, it's going to be your $1 million account plus in the next 18 months, right? Then spend the time researching that. So your top 3 to 5 accounts should have a high level of research in there, where, you understand like how they make money, you understand the different revenue streams, you've got a good overview in their organization. Again, like, I work for a company that sells a technical product, so understanding the tech stack for us is really important. Have they got data in the cloud? Is the data sitting on, on-premise hardware, for example? That's the types of things that we look at. But really doing that research is critical, and knowing who that you're going to target and having a point of view when you prospect into those people, because you want to do smart prospecting, not just, pick up the phone, cold call them, and, hopefully get somewhere. If you can talk to them about one of their projects, talk to them about, something that's related to them, there's a higher chance that they're going to, like, stay on the call, or at least take a call with you if you're sort of prospecting via email.
So, Carl, just reflecting on the point that you've just made, you're obviously talking about the fact it's important to also reflect on the fact that you shouldn't just go steaming in. But how does it help you to remain accountable, not beating yourself up for not just getting the PG done, and really being kind of in control of where you are in the deal cycle? How does this kind of tell us a bit about this mindset of not just accelerating, but really how does the data help you know where you are and what you need to do and how to step forward from where you are right now?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I mentioned it, but when you're new in a company, like, you really are an SDR, right? When you're an IC, you're coming in new, you are an SDR. So having that focus on the right accounts and just not giving up. So the NBMs is key, because you're not going to just like outbound into one organization, have one meeting, and then all of a sudden you've got, $1 million opportunity. It just doesn't work that way. So the accountability is really key, because you'll spend, you'll spend, for example, weeks. So let's say, for example, right, you said, let's do a day research into an account, and you map out all the key people that you want to get to and all the key channels that you want to leverage, all the partners, the hyperscalers, leveraging your internal ecosystem around prospecting to get into that account, to surround it, right? It takes time to plan on that, right? And you have to do multiple MBMs. So holding yourself accountable to get around the business. And, if you have examples in the US, for example, with a financial services organization where there's business-driven use cases that are successful, right, that you can talk to, that's going to help you, and you should be prospecting around that. And I think, like, one account a week, I think for me is enough, because if you take like a large, some of the largest banks and retailers here in the UK, right, there's just so much opportunity in there. If you're working on that for like a day, then you go to your next account and your next account, and you're doing like 3 big accounts in a week and trying to hold yourself accountable to that, you're really going to struggle. So like one account, yeah, you could have it for 2-3 weeks to yourself, really to penetrate it, to prospect into it, to get all over it, to leverage the ecosystem, to have all the various different NBN meetings that you need to have. So holding yourself accountable, it's a case of focus, right? Make sure you've got a plan, make sure you've got a strategy around your prospecting. And then again, back to the internal accountability, if you've got an SDR or BDR, making sure that they're on board with what your strategy is, right? Don't just give your SDR an account without a point of view around it. Don't just say, hey, like, please, can you just get me 3 meetings in an account this week? Spend the time with them on your weekly one-to-one with your SDR, sort of setting them up for success for the week. This is an account that I want to spend the next 2 to 3 weeks getting all over. This is why. This is how we plan to do it. These are the key people. This is the why, right? This is why we're going after this account. And that focus and being accountable to that focus is then going to make your SDR really successful, because they know why they're going after that account. And they've got all the context and all your research. So they can cold call into someone across the whole business and have a point of view, right? Or if, for example, the CIO just happens to call you back, call the SDR back, they understand that account. They've got a point of view on that account. So that focus in, and not just jumping around different accounts on a week by week basis, is how you hold yourself accountable.
Amazing. So once you've obviously started to collect the data, what are you then doing with that data?
So for me, it's like, like I said, it's like every Sunday I sort of would set myself up. I put an hour or two aside and I'd review the week ahead. And for example, right, let's say you're saying, right, this week I'm focusing on this large bank. It's like a top 5 account for me. How much prospecting activity are you putting into that bank in that given week? So like it's from like that going into that week, if you're not putting the right amount of prospecting into that account, or for example, you've got a deal that you're committing, or a deal that you've got an upside best case. If you don't have a meeting in that account in that next week, I would challenge, I challenge my team, but I would challenge myself when I was an IC. Like, how can I be committing a deal if I don't have one single meeting in the diary with that organization next week? Like not one champion meeting, don't have like, one sort of like check-in point with legal, check-in point with procurement, or I'm not prospecting to go further and wider in the account to potentially drive a bigger deal or to get to more use cases. I would be, sort of challenging myself. So I would use it on a weekly basis, for example, to impact my business every single week. But then, like, where you get the most value out of it is when you review it on a quarterly basis, right? So say, for example, you land 2 net new logos and you're running your QBR and you're looking at the data points that you've collected throughout that quarter on a week by week basis. You can know, right? I can tell you right now, like I, landed a deal here in the UK, and it was 74 meetings to land that account, right? And I could tell you the breakdown of those meetings, right? How many of them were champion meetings on a one-to-one basis? How many of them, for example, were like technical workshops? Then I could tell you, the length of the proof of concept, how long that took, and the key impact meetings that happened along the way, including the whole ecosystem that was involved around it. Our solution here at Starburst is in the cloud, and having worked at Databricks is in the cloud as well. So these hyperscalers and the clouds play a big part in the deals that we're working as well. So we spend a lot of time with them within our ecosystem as well, and they obviously count towards the deal as well. So that's the most important thing when you're retrospectively looking back, because then you're saying, okay, like the cost of acquisition in terms of time to land a new logo is a lot, right? And if you think about it, if you're hunting after like 50 accounts, you're really going to struggle because you're spreading yourself way too thin. If you know it takes 74 meetings across like a 9-month period to land a net new logo of X dollar value, then you need to prioritize your time. And as an IC, time is your worst enemy because there's only so many hours in the day, and you need to be spending your time in the right accounts and the right opportunities with the right people. So it's obviously that opportunity cost and looking at where do you need to and where should you be spending your time.
When obviously data becomes more accurate the more data you have, and I suppose within a startup, when you're taking new emerging technology to market, those data points are going to be limited and there's not going to be as much data. How do you then start accurately forecasting the number of meetings then you need to have when it comes to data points to enable you to be able to secure that deal?
It is a really good question, and I would say like I mean, there's technologies now that can be invested in that can help collect this data. And like, don't get me wrong, like I obsess over the data. I enjoy manually collecting it. But if you speak to quite a lot of ICs, are they really going to enjoy spending 1-2 hours a week collecting data sort of manually when it can actually be automated, right? Via certain sales automation tools that exist at the moment. So that definitely helps in terms of the collection of the data, because some people are very successful in early stage companies that they figured it out before. In early stage companies, they know how to sell. They're like phenomenal champion builders. They've got a great route to money. These like data points can be different for different type of people. So I mean, like, how does it scale? Is via automation tools, sales automation tools, because that's where the repeatability can come off the back of that.
I suppose I want to get back to the whole kind of internal accountability versus external accountability, Carl. This is something that you talk a lot about. So just tell us a little bit about how you define the difference and what you mean and what the kind of the tenets
Yeah,
are of that.
definitely. So like we've been talking about external accountability, right? So that's tracking your kind of key data points that you're holding yourself accountable to in your business, that you're sort of reflecting back on. So that's the MBMs and key impact meetings and deals, and your prospecting focus week in, week out, right? So that's how you hold yourself accountable as an IC. The internal one's really interesting and is, in my opinion, equally as important, right? And the reason that is internal accountability, like, you've got, for example, you've got customer success, you've got marketing, particularly in early stage companies, which I've joined, it's been a fairly technical product, right? So you've got like a solution architect or a solution engineer, however it may be called in your organization, but you've also got, founding teams that, are CEO, CTO, like, you've got technical people, you've got business people, but like back to the same point and why it's related, it is really hard to sell in an early stage company, and leveraging the internal ecosystem and building your internal brand is really, really important. Where I've seen the most value in it is like you've landed a deal and then you're looking at expansion. So, last two organizations I've worked in, it's a land and expand, and it's a consumption based pricing model, and it's a consumption based world, right? So you'll land a deal typically in like, one use case or two use cases, maybe more, but just in terms of in general, right? You land a couple of use cases, and then it's a case of more and more internal stakeholders start to get involved, right? Because we sell services, so customer success are involved. You may have like a post-sales solution architect that gets involved, right? But as an AE, you make the most money in that upsell, because your land is going to could be a six-figure land, but the reality is the expansion could be 2, 3, 5, 10 times that.
So for our listeners and for our viewers, what are the things that they should try on the back of the things that we've spoken about today?
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, let's maybe start on the external side of things in terms of external accountability, right? Like, my advice is, if you're new in a company, or even if you're not new in a company, it's like an early stage company, and you're trying to figure things out. You kind of, your prospect, you've got your account list, you picked up your prospecting, you're sort of starting to leverage all the channels to get in the door, track it, right? Like, just, again, I use the spreadsheet, however you want to do it, but just start to track your activity, right? So track things such as how many net new business meetings, like true net new business meetings, right, are you having on a weekly basis, right? And then also looking at the number of meetings that you're having in the accounts where you've got active opportunities as well. I would also, again, like, I'm a very partner centric person, and like my strategy is all around sort of partner first, and it always has been, right? So leveraging the ecosystem, look at the meetings that are happening within your accounts as well.
Yeah, amazing, great tips there, and I think we've certainly taken a lot from there. So this is the time when we kind of reflect on what we've heard today, and I think it's really interesting that the topic is all about what do you do as a first man on the ground, first person on the ground, In a startup where you haven't got perhaps a track record, maybe there's some use cases in the US, but maybe not so much in EMEA, what are your priorities? And the choice of words that you've used are accountability, external, internal accountability. Because it's not just about collecting data, it's about holding yourself accountable to that, and the rigor and the workflow and the operating rhythm and the analysis. And it's really looking for the efficiencies and the effectiveness and really tracking the data to be able to then create a blueprint for repeatable success. And I think one of the things that, we hear we've heard from you today and many others is that, in order to really go and start smashing the number out of the park, you need to have that consistency, and it's about avoiding those peaks and troughs. So I think, looking at internal accountability, really leveraging your support network around you, and then really being accountable to the data. I think this is the key to the main theme of what we've heard today, Kyle. And I think it's been a fantastic topic, and thank you so much for your contribution.
So to all our viewers and listeners, we've hoped you've enjoyed this session. If you've liked what you've heard, please do share, subscribe, and like. But a massive thank you to you, Kyle, for coming and joining us on the show, sharing your wisdom. It's been absolutely fantastic. We've really enjoyed having you on the show. But we'd like to welcome everybody back for another mastery session soon. Thank you so much.